So this happened. So the Cliff Notes version. A couple of months ago, I'm putting it back on one of my shields, and I completely messed up the process, and I had to start all over again. So as I'm cleaning things up, I get the resin off of the mold, but it wouldn't come out from the holes. And this happens from time to time. Normally it's no big deal because I use a hefty, healthy amount of release agent. So all I have to do is take a stick or something and usually press on it and it pops right out. For some reason or another, this particular session, the resin did not want to let go. It was being very stubborn. So I got the idea of using my punch marker. For those who may not know what this is, if you've ever tried to drill into a hard surface like metal, the drill bit will tend to want to wander around like a spinning top. So one of the things that you can do to counter that is you get something called a hole punch. And this has a very small, fine tip. And inside here is a spring. And what you do is you press down on it until the spring hammers a little dent into your surface. Then what you do is you take your drill and it'll rest right in that little dent and stay put long enough for the bit to start biting into the metal. Great. It's like a little mini jackhammer. So I decide I'm going to take this and start pressing on the resin and hammering it out. Pressing on the resin and hammering it out. It worked great until it didn't. So it turns out that the mold couldn't handle the shock of the punch marker. And this is what we would call a catastrophic failure. So now what? I thought about ordering another one from CraftCloud 3D, which is where I got this back in 2022, 23. The good news with that is if I ordered the exact same thing today, it would cost about half of what it cost back then, which is good, but it's still pricey, but it's good. The problem is, in my opinion, there's really no reason to order the exact same thing only to have the exact same problems. And to order one that I would want, it would be insanely cost prohibitive. So then the next thing you might be thinking is, well, just make a mold from the backs of one of your shields, Jed. That's a good idea. The only problem with that is, truth be told, all of the really good ones are out there in the ether with you guys. The ones that I hang on to, I kind of ruined. Either through experimenting on them to come up with ways to improve the process, for bringing with me for charity events where I let anybody who wants to hold the shield can hold the shield. And that introduces wear and tear. So here with me, I do not have a pristine back to make a mold from. So that's that. No more shields. But then I realized I now have a 3D printer and I have a subscription to a 3D modeling app. I can make anything I want.
Then a god am.
Not only can I print my own mold myself, but this time I can design into it features that I didn't know I needed the first time around. And after a lot of work, this is what I came up with. Version 1 meet version 2. So how is version 2 an improvement over version 1? Well, for starters, it's thicker. Presumably, thicker equals stronger. When I ordered version 1, I opted for something called tough resin. I knew I wanted it to be resin printed because resin printing tends to print in higher resolution than standard layer line printing. I don't know how tough resin is supposed to be, but in my experience, when the foam would expand, it would actually start to distort the shape of the back unless I stopped it by having to implement all kinds of anchors and things. Maybe it's just because it was this thin of a material or whatever, but this time around, I'm going to be printing in PETG, P-E-T-G, PETG. I'm calling it PETG, whatever. But unlike PLA, which tends to be kind of on the brittle side, especially for this purpose. PETG is insanely strong. It's kind of like printing a Lego brick. And if you ever watch Lego Masters, you would be surprised how strong Lego bricks really are.
1,000 pounds!
So the original idea that I had was, after I've coated the back in resin and after I poured the foam and the foam starts to expand, I would take the back, put it over top, and then secure it with about 16 of these bar clamps. And I would do that all around the edge. It actually worked fairly well. The only issue that I ran into was every place that one of these was making contact, there would be in the back like a little bit of a dent. So all around the edge, it was making this wavy pattern that's impossible to get out. To mitigate that, I ended up getting a 24-inch ring. I would put this right on the edge, and now when I clamp down, this would evenly just disperse all of the pressure. And it worked great. Nice even pressure, no wavy lines. Here's the problem. This doesn't want to stay put. The only way I can make it stay put is to put a bunch of duct tape, which gets in my way, makes a mess. For the version 2 mold, I designed into the mold an embedded home for the ring to sit. So now it'll stay put. I also gave myself these vent holes. So the way that this works is, as the foam is expanding, the air inside of the cavity has to go someplace. And if you don't give it a path to escape, it's going to make one. Usually someplace you don't want it. So it's best to give it a vent hole where the air can escape and hide it someplace that is unnoticeable. For instance, in this case, the inside of the squares of the brackets, which will mostly be covered by the leather straps anyway. I didn't do too much to change the front. The main thing that I did was I extended it just a little bit, and I gave myself a little bit of a lip along the front edge to prevent the resin from dripping over the sides. So one of the biggest problems to overcome with this whole process pertains to the holes that I use to place the T-nuts. The main problem is you pour the foam, and as the foam starts to expand, it's of course going to want to expand all over the place. And it's going to find these holes, and then it's going to want to go out through the holes instead of spread out to the edges. And that becomes a problem because to overcome this, I really have to just keep putting in more and more foam. And it's a waste of material. Everything that I have tried to close these holes hasn't really worked. Duct tape doesn't work. Gorilla tape doesn't work. A lot of Gorilla tape doesn't work. The foam wants to escape. To fix this, I incorporated into the design threads and screws. These can act as caps so that they will block these holes. I didn't know it at the time, but this actually created another issue that I have to address at some point. So now I have my modified design, and all I have to do is find some way to get it to fit inside of my printer. Now, my 3D printer can print just about anything as long as it fits inside of just shy of a 12-inch cube, which is way too small for a 24-inch disc. If I was going to make this work, I was going to have to find a way to break it into pieces small enough so it'll fit on my print bed. I've seen people do this online, and they just kind of cut it up into squares and then reassemble it with Bondo or whatever their adhesive of choice is. I didn't want to do that because it seems like it would just put creases out in the open. And with my experience, when you put the metallic finish on the back of something, any imperfection will suddenly announce itself. So I wanted to find a way to better hide the seams. And it seems like for me, anywhere that there is a crease or a broken pattern would be a better place to hide it. So I ended up cutting this into 7 different pieces, some of which just barely fit onto my print bed. And remember, the goal for this is because it has to be able to withstand the force of the foam that's trying to get out. So I designed the pieces so that they slip into each other and overlap. And the hope is that the overlap will reinforce each other as the pressure is mounting, as opposed to a straight cut, which opens up the possibility to a point of failure. And as a finishing touch, I designed and incorporated these wedges that keep everything together once it's all assembled and in alignment. With everything in place, I'm finally ready to start 3D printing. And it is at this point in the process that I was forced to understand the true dark side of 3D printing. Failed print after failed print after failed print for no apparent reason. The most baffling thing was this wavy texture that the printer kept putting into the pieces, and only into the pieces when I was printing them for real. If I did any modification to the scale, I made it bigger so that print smooth. Make it smaller, print smooth. I chopped it into little sections to run a test print, print smooth. I changed settings, I did things, but no matter what I tried and what setting I put in, it would always, when I wanted it to print the item for real, print with a wavy texture on it. I can't figure it out. And there does come a point where at the rate I'm going, it would have cost less to send this out to get printed, and I didn't want to get to that point. So I just decided good enough is good enough, and I'm going to sand away these wavy lines. Some JB Weld and a whole lot of sanding later. Voila. One feature that I had to do away with was the rivets in the bracket. There was no way I was going to get a sand around them to any degree of quality. So I had to sand them away and put them in later by hand. The resin went on well. The foam went about as well as to be expected. One thing that I did notice was it felt anyway that the foam more than normal had been spilling over the edges, which I hope means that the screws idea was working and everything was going fine until it wasn't. I have never had a mold refuse to release like this one. The best that I can figure, the resin got into the threads, and then after it cured, you have an overhang situation. And now the resin and the shield are locked together. When that happens, there's only one way to get them apart. One of them has to break. The mold was so stubborn that the wedges that I use to separate the mold started to damage the lip. I had to resort to using a screwdriver as a crowbar, which I never had to do before, and which worked to varying degrees of success. It took about 90 minutes until finally I was convinced that the entire center part of the resin was still stuck on the shield. And yet, much to my surprise, it wasn't as bad as I expected. So here it is, all patched up and ready to go. I know that there were some problems with the process, but actually, all in all, I am very happy with this. I can't wait to start painting it.
How's it going?
It's going great. How about you? Did you get the backs done?
I did. I got the back. I tried it. I got the one back done, and honestly, I think it might be the best one that I've made so far. Like normally there's little things that happen, but this one, the edges are nice and crisp, and the surface is smooth. I usually have to kind of smooth out the surface. This one's nice. The weight is right. I can't wait to paint it, and I mean, this means that I can go back to making shields again. So. There's a few things that I got to iron out about the process, but I can go back to making shields.
What a few other things. What else is wrong?
I'm always fighting against that foam. You know, I can't think of anything else to put in the shields other than the foam. But the problem is it expands so forcefully and so quick. What I really need is I got to figure out some way to like put the back on and secure the whole thing all at one time.
Couldn't you just do like a clamshell and then a latch?